Hello NFL fans, welcome to NFL Picks with Dave. Before we begin today, I have an announcement. There will be no new video next week due to me having my wisdom teeth taken out. I'll either be back the week after the operation or on the last week of this month, depending on how I'm feeling and how my week schedule plays out. Feel free to send me a message on my Twitter account or on this channel's Facebook page if you have any questions about this. Okay, moving on. Today we're going to predict how NFL Week 5 will turn out. On Twitter, I predicted that Chicago would defeat Tampa Bay with a score of 20-17. The final score was Bears 20, Buccaneers 19. Let's move on to Sunday's games. Our first game takes us to Nashville, Tennessee, where the Titans take on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills last week defeated the Vegas Raiders with a score of 30-23. The Titans, meanwhile, had a miserable bye week last week due to them having multiple players test positive for COVID-19. I'm going to have to pick the Tennessee Titans with a score of 20-17 because they had more time off and are playing at home. Our next game is between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the winless Houston Texans. The Jaguars last week were defeated by the Cincinnati Bengals with a score of 33-25. The Texans, meanwhile, lost to the Minnesota Vikings with a score of 31-23. The day after the game, head coach Bill O'Brien was fired by the Texans due to their poor record of 0-4. I'm going to pick the Texans in this game with a score of 27-20 because they're at home and I feel like they're more stronger than the Jaguars despite their poor record. My next pick takes us to Baltimore, Maryland, where the Ravens host the Bengals. Baltimore defeated Washington last week with a score of 31-17, while the Bengals defeated the Jaguars and earned their first win of the season. I'm going to pick the Ravens with a score of 31-21 because I feel like they're the stronger team. Our next game is between the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. Last week, the Panthers pulled off a shocking upset over the Arizona Cardinals with a score of 31-21. Atlanta, meanwhile, lost to Green Bay with a score of 30-16 to remain winless to start the season. I'm going to pick the Panthers with a score of 38-17 because they had a much better week than the Falcons and are finding their groove in the season. My next picks are the Cardinals over the Jets, 31-10, the Steelers over the Eagles, 24-21, the Chiefs over the Raiders, 31-24, and the LA Rams over the Washington Football Team, 42-21. This pick is the lock of the week. Now let's move on to the later games. Our first late game takes us to Santa Clara, California, where the 49ers take on the Dolphins. San Francisco last week lost in a shocker to the Eagles with a score of 25-20, while the Dolphins lost to the Seahawks with a score of 31-23. This pick is a tough one. I'm picking the 49ers with a score of 27-24. Our next game takes us to Arlington, Texas, where the Cowboys clash with the New York Giants. The Cowboys last week had an embarrassing loss to the Browns. The final score was 49-38. The Giants, meanwhile, lost in a heartbreaker to the Rams with a score of 17-9. I'm picking the Giants with a score of 21-14 because they had a much better week and are determined to get a win. My next pick takes us to Foxborough, Massachusetts, where the Patriots host the Broncos. The Patriots last week lost to the Kansas City Chiefs with a score of 26-10. The Broncos, meanwhile, defeated the New York Jets with a score of 37-28. I'm picking the Patriots with a score of 13-10 because they are overall a better team than Denver is. Our final late afternoon matchup is between the Indianapolis Colts and the Cleveland Browns. The Colts last week defeated the Bears with a score of 19-11. The Browns, meanwhile, defeated the Cowboys. I'm going to pick the Colts with a score of 28-21. Now let's move on to the last two primetime games. Our first primetime game takes us to Seattle, Washington, where the Seahawks take on the Vikings. The Seahawks last week defeated the Dolphins to earn their second 4-0 start in franchise history. The Vikings, meanwhile, defeated the Texans to get their first win of the season. Because this game's in Seattle and on primetime, I'm picking the Seahawks with a score of 31-28. And now, our last pick of the week. It's the Chargers taking on the New Orleans Saints. Last week, the Chargers were defeated by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a score of 38-31. The Saints, meanwhile, defeated the Detroit Lions with a score of 35-29. I'm picking the Saints with a score of 35-21 because they're the better team than the Chargers are. That does it for today's episode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest videos and posts I do. Also, follow me on Twitter at DavidNader2, and be sure to like and follow this channel's Facebook page. Thanks again for watching, and remember to wear a mask, practice social distancing, and to stay home when you're sick. Thanks for staying safe, and hope to see you again in a few weeks.